Hi, good day. Hope you're having a great day. I haven't had a chance to record since Shavuot, so here's one of my sermons from Shavuot. Have you ever heard of James Baker? If you haven't, James Baker was the US Secretary of State during the presidency of George H.W. Bush. That's Bush Sr. Mr. Baker was not exactly friendly to Israel, and I would say that's putting it mildly. He forced Israel to agree to concessions that seriously jeopardized its security. In 1989, a newly appointed foreign minister of Israel arrives in Washington, D.C. for the first time, along with his entire entourage to meet with the American Secretary of State. The Shabbat before, at a Farbrengen, the Rebbe said publicly that a top official from the Israeli government is coming to meet with the United States government, and he should defend the security of the land of Israel. And generally speaking, when the Rebbe spoke, the Rebbe often spoke about the security of the land of Israel. He said he should defend the security of the land of Israel, stand strong, and not give in. Two Chabad rabbis who knew the foreign minister decided to deliver the Rebbe's message to him. And when he came down to the hotel lobby on his way to the meeting, they were waiting for him. The minister recognized them and greeted them, and they're able to tell the minister what the Rebbe had said, to be strong. When they entered the meeting, Mr. Baker presented his counterpart, this Israeli minister, with a list of written American demands regarding the halting of all kinds of activity in the West Bank and Gaza. The brash Israeli foreign minister replied as follows: "As you know, I represent an independent nation state. And as a general rule, if you wanted to send me such a letter, you should have faxed it." Faxing was the primary way of communication for letters in those days. "You should have faxed it and not summoned me all the way here." The minister then stood up in a fury and said to his group, "We're leaving." Mr. Baker jumped up and followed him, apologizing, and offered to serve him a drink. From that point on, he knew exactly who he was dealing with, and ultimately they became friends. That minister was none other than the legendary Israeli political leader and diplomat who actually passed away last week, Mr. David Levy. Years later, Mr. Levy commented that the Rebbe's message that was delivered to him gave him the strength to stand up to Baker. Who was this David Levy? David Levy was born in Morocco in 1937. In 1957, at the age of 19, he made Aliyah to Israel along with his parents and his entire family. They settled in a place called Beit She'an, then a refugee camp, and now a flourishing Israeli city. But back then, life in Beit She'an was very hard. They couldn't find steady work, and David worked at whatever job was available. He married and shortly later had his first child, a girl, but then had no success in finding any work at all. And once fleeing, having this feeling of frustration after a long period of unemployment, he broke the door of a local employment office. The cops arrested him, and he sat in a holding cell for 12 days. He later would say that through this short prison sentence, he refused to shave. He wanted a mourner's face. And when he looked in the mirror of his cell restroom, tears flowed from his eyes. He wept from the cruelty of life. Everything came back before him in one image. The day they had left Morocco with so much love for the land of Israel in their hearts, with so much faith, with so much hope. Before his eyes, he saw the days before the departure from Morocco. He recalled their Passover seders, the days when his father walked tall and proud, the days when he just felt happy about life. But then David says, I suddenly found myself not crying. I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I thought, what can I do to change my situation? And also the situation of those whose lot in life is like my family's lot in life. He realized that turning over tables at an employment office is not the way to go. It was the path to prison for sure. Instead, he said he was going to find the path. And at that moment, he decided that that path would lead him forward to a position of influence from which he could change the very things at their root. He says that was a turning point in my life. I walked out of that holding cell a new man. He soon found work as a construction worker and later ran for election on the Beit Sha'an City Council, and he won. He was appointed as the vice chairman of the council, and from there, his political career took off, leading him to 40 years in the Knesset, including 29 years as the minister of Israel's national government. But what was even more significant than that was that he became the face of the quote-unquote second-class Israel, that all of the immigrants who never quite acclimated to Israeli society, who lived in neighborhoods that were plagued by deprivation and poverty, he became the voice of all those who had no voice. He became a warrior for the poor, for the downtrodden. And it was David Levy who pioneered one of Israel's neighborhood rehab projects, working to improve deprived areas that became hotbeds of crime, of poverty, of suffering. And throughout all those years, even when Mr. Levy was serving as foreign minister, he never forgot who he really was. He never abandoned Beit Sha'an. He came back home whenever he had a chance. In his extensive travels abroad, he didn't look for a high-class hotel. His one and only concern was making sure there was kosher food there. He was actually a man who was accustomed to going to synagogue to pray every Shabbat. Once, while serving as the foreign minister, he was walking out of a shul on Shabbat afternoon with his nephew, as his entire security entourage in a police car tagged along. And he turned to his nephew, who had just completed his mandatory military service. And he said, "You see this entire entourage behind me? These are the security guards of the foreign minister of Israel, not David Levy. Never forget where you come from." In 1990, he visited the Rebbe and received $1 and a blessing. The Rebbe received him very warmly, and Levy commented to the Rebbe that the Aliyah of 20,000 Jews from the former Soviet Union was a miracle that only believing Jews could possibly understand, because it seemed impossible. Just a short time earlier, he said, it was the finger of God. The Rebbe smiles and he says, it wasn't just a finger. It was a full hand 5 times over. Before he left, the Rebbe gave him a blessing for long leadership. The story of David Levy, really a rags to riches story, reminded me of a teaching I heard from the Rebbe about a different David, about King David. I don't know if you know this, but on the holiday of Shavuot is the birthday and the Yartzeit, the day of the passing of King David. He passed away on his 70th birthday. He was exactly 70 years old. King David is mentioned in the Tanakh more than any other figure. His name is mentioned 1,023 times. Just for the sake of comparison, just so you understand, Moses is only mentioned 770 times. King Saul is mentioned 407 times, and King Solomon is mentioned only 293 times. King David, in addition to being the monarch over the United Kingdom of Israel, was the first author of the Jewish prayer book, the book of Psalms, the book of Tehillim. Now, if you have gone through the Psalms, you know there are so many different types of prayers in the Psalms. Some chapters begin with the phrase Tefillah LeMoshe, a prayer of Moses. Other chapters begin with Tefillah LeDavid, a prayer of David. Others begin Tefillah LeAni, a prayer for a poor person. Moshe, David, the poor person. I think they symbolize three categories of prayer, which actually goes back to the temple era when we brought sacrifices, not prayers. There were several levels of sacrifices. A rich man who could afford an expensive sacrifice brought a bull or a sheep or a goat. I'm not going to talk about animal sacrifices now. This was part of our history, and this is what happened at the temple. Someone neither rich nor poor, what we'd call middle class, they brought a bird as a sacrifice, a pigeon, a dove. But a poor person, a less fortunate person, made a sacrifice with a bit of flour, oil, and incense. Now, not only will the pauper sacrifice, the less fortunate sacrifice, be accepted by God like the wealthy person's sacrifice. On the contrary, the less fortunate sacrifice is dearer to God than that of the wealthy. Rashi, who's the foremost commentator, the super commentary on the Torah, he says, with the words in Leviticus, "V'nefesh ki sakriv," it says in Leviticus, "and if your soul brings," regarding all the sacrifices which were donated voluntarily, the only instance where the scripture, where the Torah states the word soul, is in the case of the meal offering. Now, who usually donates a meal offering? Only the less fortunate. And God says, I account for them as if they sacrificed their very own soul. In other words, because the less fortunate literally takes the food for themselves and for their family and brings it as a sacrifice to God, it's considered as if they sacrificed their very life itself. Today, we don't have a temple. We pray for the temple to be rebuilt, but we don't have a temple today. And the sages tell us in the Talmud that the prayers were established to correspond to the sacrifices. That just as the karbonot, the sacrifices, have three categories, prayers also have three categories. So let's go back. Tefillah LeMoshe, the prayer of Moses, that represents the prayer of the wealthy. This is because Moses is the one who gave us the Torah, referred to as the Moses Torah, Torah's Moshe. And so Tefillah LeMoshe, the prayer of Moses, symbolizes the person who is a scholar, a Torah scholar, who keeps the mitzvot, who studies the Torah. They are spiritually wealthy. The prayer of David, Tefillah LeDavid, is the prayer of the middle class. Now, King David is referred to as Ne'im Zemirot Yisrael, the sweet singer of Israel, meaning that David symbolizes the person for whom Torah scholarship is not the strongest suit, but knows how to pray and does. This person isn't wealthy, but somewhere in the middle. And then we've got the third type, Tefillah LeAni, the person who is spiritually poor, the less fortunate. This is a person who was never taught how to pray, who just stands there with the crowd when they come to the synagogue on Yom Kippur, but doesn't really recite any of the prayers. Maybe this person has imposter syndrome, feels like, what am I doing here? And then maybe sometimes even says, if I don't know how to pray, why should I even come? The Rebbe quotes from the Zohar and says that the prayers of the wealthy, the prayers of the average, they're only answered by God when the prayers of the less fortunate arrive. The prayers of the wealthy, the prayers of the average, they're only good, they're only answered by God when God gets the prayers of the less fortunate. It's precisely the less fortunate who succeeds in piercing the heavens. It's precisely the person who goes to synagogue, every so often. And when they go, they have an imposter syndrome. They're not even sure what they're doing there. But when they pray from the depths of their hearts. That's the prayer that pierces the heavens. The power in the tefillah le'ani, the power in the prayer of the less fortunate, it elevates all the other prayers. You might even say that this is why the Yom Kippur prayers are most readily accepted by God, because it's Yom Kippur, when all the Jews come, whose prayers pierce the heavens, and in whose merit our prayers are accepted too. So today we spoke about David Levy. You remember him as his family sits Shiva? David Levy, who has the same name as King David. But he, like King David, represents Tefillah La'ani, the prayer of the less fortunate. He grew up in a difficult circumstance. He worked hard to make a difference. And David Levy's prayers were answered. And Hashem should bless each and every one of us, that our prayers should be answered. Even if we don't understand, even if we can't figure out exactly what's going on now. A little prayer, 30 seconds, from the depths of our heart, from our soul, from our entire being. That little prayer, that's going to pierce the heavens. That's going to change everything. You don't have to even know how to pray. God knows all languages. God knows all hearts and all souls. And Hashem should bless each and every one of you, that you should just take that moment, have that conversation. May it pierce the heavens. And may we have a world filled with peace and with love.